Everyone. My name is Christy Crisologo. I'm a part of the team at the Student Doctor Network. We're excited to be here with you tonight and excited to be partnering with Nextstep Test Prep to bring you all this webinar, this MCAT strategy webinar on the critical analysis and reasoning section of the test, better known as CARS. A few housekeeping things to get out of the way. There is a handout that you will need for tonight's webinar. That handout has been sent out in the chat box, and I think just sent it out again for anyone who may have joined us since that went out the first time. It's also, there's a little drop-down section on your menu that says handouts, and you should be able to download it directly from there. So make sure that you have that preferably printed out. That will help you this evening. If not, just make sure you have it up and can refer to it as we go through everything this evening. You won't need a microphone or anything. You'll just need your speakers in the screen, and you can sit back and listen and follow along with us as we go. Really quick, I want to test our questions box. Make sure you all know where that is. So that's how you'll communicate with us throughout the evening. Just if you have questions throughout as we're going through, feel free to pop those in there, and then we'll get to questions at the end with the time that we have remaining, answer as many of those as we can get to. So to test that out, go ahead and tell me what you had for dinner tonight, or if you've had dinner, maybe if you haven't, tell me what you had for a snack. Just pop that in the questions box so I can see you all know where that is. Ooh, Chipotle, that sounds really good. Pizza, tacos, nice. Very good. Eggplant, I like eggplant, that's good. Popcorn, Moe's. A couple people had Moe's tonight. Very good. A nice variety. Ooh, Nutella sandwich. That sounds delicious. All right, so it sounds like you all know where the question box is. The other thing that you'll need for this evening is we'll be doing some polls as we go through the section. So to test those out, we have a couple to go through to start out with. Our first question says, what section of the MCAT worries you the most? So go ahead and answer that, and then we'll be able to see what everyone says here in a minute. All right, so it looks like 4% are worried about biology, 44% chemical and physical foundations. Only 3% are concerned about the psychological, social, and biological foundations of behavior. 29% are worried about cars. You're in the right place for tonight. And the whole darn thing's about 21%. So a pretty good spread there. It looks like everybody has different areas that they'll want to focus on. We'll do one more poll before we get started. That is, when do you plan on taking the MCAT? All right, the vast majority, it looks like, are going to take it within 3 months, about 64%, 23% for the end of the year, 5% spring 2017, 6% summer 2017, and then a few of you, just a couple of you, aren't sure. So that's how the polls will work, and we'll be using those throughout the evening. I will get started here. Again, this is the MCAT strategy workshop for the critical analysis and reasoning section of the test. If you could go ahead and advance the slide for me, it looks like I'm not able to take control. Again, we're the Student Doctor Network. The Student Doctor Network is a community of health professionals and students dedicated to providing students, residents, and practitioners with free and unbiased information. The educational mission of SDN is to assist and encourage all students through the challenging and complicated healthcare education process and into practice. That's a lot of words. Basically, what you need to know about us is we're a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping students become doctors. So if you're a student and you're hoping to become a doctor, we're for you. And that includes not just MDs and DOs, but almost every doctoral level health profession, from optometry, pharmacy, veterinary, dentistry, podiatry. We have all of those. We have over 500,000 members and a vibrant community of people helping each other, people who are farther down the path, helping those who are coming behind them. So if you haven't checked us out, we also have a number of resources outside of our community area. I hope you'll go to studentdoctor.net and check that out and join our community over there. Our speaker tonight is going to be Dr. Anthony LaFond, MD, PhD. He is the National Content Director of Nextstep Test Prep. He has been teaching and tutoring for over a decade. He's personally written and edited the majority of Nextstep's MCAT content. He's achieved top scores on the exams himself. You can see on our slide, he got a 42 on the old scoring MCAT. He holds both an MD and PhD degrees from UMDNJ. And so we're very excited to hear from him tonight. And from here, I will turn it over to him.
All right, thank you very much, Christy. I know the school's a mouthful. Luckily, it's changed its name to Rutgers, so we're no longer alphabet soup in terms of school naming. So welcome, everybody. I'm Dr. Anthony, and I'm going to be taking you guys and girls tonight through a little bit of the critical analysis and reasoning section. So I want to thank Christy and SDN for hosting this event with us. I can remember back in my day, it's going on 10 years now, when I was applying to med school, SDN was still around, it was relatively new, and it's really nice to see how big and organized and much more helpful the website's gotten. So I definitely recommend checking that out, throughout all stages. And I used it pretty much while I was studying and in med school and everything else. So sadly, you'll never not need it if you find it a good resource, which is pretty good. So what are we going to be talking about today? First, we're going to be talking about prepping for the MCAT in general. So let's talk a little bit about, for you people who are taking the test within the next 3 months, which is most of you, about a good 2/3 of you are taking it in the next 3 months, or if you plan on taking it sometime in 2016, you want to have a game plan. So most study schedules generally, focus on content review. Everyone knows they need science at a certain level of content to do well on the MCAT. And that's one part of it. And that is one of the early parts of your studying. So when you're studying for the MCAT, content review, of course, should be part of your early review, but it doesn't need to be all of it. Very quickly, you will discover the true difficulty and the true challenge of the MCAT, which is the style and tone of the questions the AMC likes to present. So one of the first things you need to do is take a diagnostic exam, review your sciences, and find out where you're strong, where you're weak. That way, you don't spend time studying material you already know, or you don't spend time studying material that you don't need for the exam, or, worst case scenario, you end up studying material or studying in a way that's not going to help you for the exam. All right, so take that diagnostic exam, see what the style of the MCAT is like, review your sciences, and that doesn't just mean reviewing your grades from undergrad. You can have a very, very good grade in the class, and maybe a not so great grasp of the fundamentals if your professor wasn't that great. Or maybe you didn't do so well in a class, but you really, really understood the material because the course was tough. But in the beginning, you want to focus on your weaker areas of content. As you progress, early on, you've got to start incorporating MCAT-style practice and strategy development, because most students who don't do well on the MCAT doesn't happen because they don't know the science. More often than not, they don't do well because they weren't prepared for how the MCAT's going to test science. And for those of you who've been studying for a little while, you can attest to this. So early on, you want to develop a strategy. And tonight, we'll be talking about critical analysis and reasoning skills. That's one area where you can start with skill and strategy development on day one, because there is no content to know. Right? As you go and develop your strategies, you'll find that there's no one best strategy for everybody. There will be certain strategies you use in one section, and maybe a slight tweak of that strategy you use in a different section. The goal is to find the strategies that work for you and then refine them and perfect them. Right? And you will have strategies for attacking the test, the section, the passage, the question, even down to wrong answers. You will want to develop strategies to deal with every aspect of the test, to remove as many unknowns as you possibly can for test day. Right? Once you've got your strategies, you think you know what you're going to do. You think you've got an idea of how you're going to attack the passage and the questions and the sections. The goal is to then practice. One of the best ways, and this will carry throughout med school as well, one of the best ways to get material to stick is to do practice question. This is the driving force behind active learning. And then you'll hear that phrase a lot when you go through med school. One of the ways I got all of that material to stick is you have to be active with it. You need your brain to constantly be accessing it, thinking about it, working with it. It's no longer like maybe in the past where you could simply memorize enough material to get by. So full length sections, full length tests are going to be able to tell you not only can you handle the material, but can you handle the material the way the MCAT tests it, and are your strategies working? Do they work for you? Okay. Now, since we're going to talk about cards, one of the things we need to deal with is multiple sections. In fact, all 4 sections of the MCAT deal with passage-based questions. And in the cars section, the only information we need is in the passage. So it's important to learn how to highlight material in these passages, which applies to cars, but also really applies to every aspect of the exam as well. But it's most important in cars. So the goal is, we're timed here. We've got 10 minutes per passage. We've got to read briskly using your highlighter. So let me know if I have any future surgeons or potential surgeons in the house. You essentially want to use your highlighter like a scalpel. You are not going to cut out tissue that's not diseased. You are not going to make unnecessary cuts to the tissue to do unnecessary damage. You want to use your highlighter focused, just like you would in surgery. Key points, which means points that are likely to be tested, information that's likely to be asked about when you get to the questions, because that is where the points are. And the AMC is very predictable in this, so they're quite helpful in allowing us to learn what they like to test. So when you look at your analysis, or really we've done all the analysis for you, is you'll find that the AMC most often likes to test, when it comes to cars, material about the author's opinion, or maybe competing opinions in a passage. Or they'll ask about contrast. You've probably seen this in science as well. They love to compare and contrast theories or phenomenon or lab results. Well, that's no different than what they like to do in cars. And probably the most important, probably one of the biggest point gainers in the car section is going to be cause and effect. So this is where you've got a relationship, whether they're saying X causes Y, X is due to Y, or hey, first I do A and then B results, or because A happened, then B must occur. This kind of cause and effect relationship you will often find tested, especially on those difficult questions, where the AMC will often ask, hey, can you tell me how would I strengthen or weaken this statement? How can I strengthen or weaken what the author is hinting at? Well, that's cause and effect. If we understand the key relationships, if we understand the ties that go between, let's say, some argument the author is making or some relationship they're positing, we can know how to strengthen or weaken that relationship, or find evidence to strengthen or weaken it, or challenge it. So cause and effect, very important to read and look for. So this isn't just passive reading. We're now actively reading these passages using our highlighter. Now we're going to model this for us passage for us. So I want you guys to grab your handouts. So if you have them printed out, get them ready, because you can follow along on the screen, but it'll be easy to follow along with your, if you actually have a handout, or if you can pull it up separately as a PDF, whichever way you want to do it. That way you can highlight or make notes if you want, but we're going to model some highlighting of these passages. Okay, so I'll give you a minute to get your highlighters out, or sorry, get your notes out and your scratch paper and anything else you might need. Okay. Okay, so for some reason I'm not able to highlight. I'm not seeing the menu. So just bear with me for a moment. I'm just trying to make sure I can highlight for you guys. For some reason, I don't have control. I'm not sure about that. So is it possible to make sure I have control of the slides again? For some reason, I seem to have lost it. There we go. Thank you. Sorry about that, guys. Not sure why it's getting all screwed up. All right, so in the meantime, while we figure this out, what I'd like to do is start reading the passage. So I'm going to go through the first paragraph with you all, and then I'll give you a minute to try the next paragraph on your own to see, all right, can we look for those key terms, opinions, points of contrast, any cause and effect relationships we might have. That's what we need to look for. All right, so let's start. One cannot help but wonder why no artist in the millennia before Rothko sought to pursue color itself as the subject of the painting. Oh, sorry about that. Somehow we got skipped ahead. Otherwise, if you might have noticed, that seemed like it started mid-thought. There we go, first paragraph. The movement of art away from the representation of things, painting of people, places, events, etc., into a wholly abstract presentation undoubtedly reached its zenith in the work of the color field painters, exemplified by the works of Mark Rothko, color field painting sought to present color in its pure state. Right? Well, right away, we've got this presentation from the author. What do they think is important? What is their opinion? Well, they've just spent 2 whole sentences, not a lot, but their opening sentences are talking about this movement of art away from representation of things and to this abstract presentation, and it reached its zenith in the work of these color field painters. And this was exemplified by the work of Mark Rothko. Color field painting sought to present color in its pure state. Okay? So right now we have a contrast and an opinion already, first couple sentences. The author clearly thinks that this Mark Rothko is the epitome of whatever this color field painting is. And apparently this color field painting contrasts strongly from representative painting. So we're moving away from this representation of things and now into this wholly abstract area of color field painters. And we see this word zenith. So it reached its zenith. Now, if you're not sure what that word means, that's okay. We may get tested on it, we may not. But apparently it's the word the author wants to use to describe this work exemplified by Mark Rothko, this move away from the representation of things to some abstract idea. Now let's keep reading, find out more about this color field painting. This purity made the color itself the subject of the painting, rather than as a tool used to express something else. So again, more contrast, and they use that term purity again. Purity is really important to this author. And you'll notice the AMC does that a lot. They love to repeat themselves if it's a major point. So we have this purity, and now the color is the subject of the painting, not just a tool of the painting. So again, more contrast. We moved away from representation of things, and now we have an abstract painting style. And on top, now color becomes the subject, not just some aspect or tool of the painting. The Cubists, Surrealists, and other abstract expressionists working earlier in the 20th century may have distorted, mocked, and radically reduced representation respectively. So we're talking the early 20th century, and we have these other painters, but it was the color field artists alone who completely stripped out any pretense of painting, something other than the painting itself. So the color field artists are unique. So they've got this strong emphasis in what these people were doing. So no one else is doing this. So this author really is cementing their opinion that whatever these people were doing, it was different, it was special, and they were taking away pretense. Rothko's works consisted of a little more than several large squares of contrasted colors in various proportions and arrangements. So in that first paragraph, we've got strong opinion on the author about what color field painting is and how it represented this removal of pretense, that maybe any removal of pretensions, that could be a positive thing if they thought other work was pretentious. We have something that's never been done before compared to the previous artist types, where your cubists, your surrealists, they couldn't do it. They may have tried, they may have distorted or mocked, but they couldn't do what the color field artists alone have done. And apparently this artist's work, Rothko, was fairly simple. Little more than several large squares of contrasted colors and proportions and arrangements. Okay. Now, again, when we're reading these passages, a good idea is to read a few sentences and then highlight. If you'll notice, we highlighted that much. We've maybe highlighted about 15 words, and typically you won't need to highlight much because then again, as we said, our highlighter should be like a scalpel. Because if you end up highlighting everything, then in reality, you've highlighted nothing. So you want to make sure one of the things you practice, if highlighting becomes a strategy for you, practice learning how to highlight, how to minimize your highlighting so you don't end up with that paint roller effect where everything seems to be highlighted and now your brain or your eyes have a hard time picking out what's important. Trust your brain. The highlighting is meant to remind you of what you came away with, what was important, what might be testable. So you've got a few strong opinions, and we've got some contrast between these old painting styles and this new color field artists. And it sets the stage for, hey, we'd like to know more about this work. Because so far we haven't been told much about what it looks like beyond the fact that Rothko's works were a bunch of squares of contrasting colors in different shapes. So I'm going to give you all a minute right now. So take a minute, read that second paragraph, and then highlight, circle, underline what you think represents any contrast, any cause and effect, any opinion that the author is providing. So take a moment, not going anywhere, and then we'll check back with you. Okay, that's just about a minute. So let's take a look at this second paragraph. So as you're reading through, they're talking more about these artists, more about these color field artists. And we found out about those, some of them were best known. So the best known color artists for representing this style were some of these people: Pollock, Picasso, Michelangelo. All of these were mentioned as examples of the best known of this style of painting, and some of their works, some of their known, styles. Okay. Now, as we keep reading, they mention that these people were able to achieve their status, their well-known, reputations, through no more remarkable means than pursuing a certain artistic idea to its very core. So apparently this is important to the author. There's nothing, they weren't doing anything special. They were pursuing an idea to its core. So this phrase, this is what the author thinks is behind their success. They're best known. How do they best become known outside of high art? For doing this, so apparently to the author, this is very important, or at least it was important to these artists. That's how they became well known, pursuing an artistic idea all the way to its core. And then we continue with this theme of stripping away extraneous thought, moving away from representation, getting away all pretense, and it leaves the core truth of the moment. So again, phrases like that, when you see, odd phrases like core truth of the moment, okay, unique flowery language, but it serves to repeat an idea we've already heard previously. This new work, whatever it was, gets away from representation, focuses on the color, gets away from pretense, gets away from extraneous thought and impulse. So this work, whatever it is all about breaking with the old ways, stripping away what painters used to focus on and moving into the new abstract, this new idea. So taking one's idea, stripping it down to its essence is, according to this passage, what makes an artist, specifically these guys, the best known for their school of art. That's what they did. Okay, so we have to wonder, well, if it was so simple, why didn't anybody else do it? Well, how come nobody before Rothko made, made these colored paintings? Let's keep moving on to the next paragraph. I'll give you a minute and try this next paragraph. Do the same thing. Look for any, or I should say, any indication of cause and effect, any contrast, any opinion the author might be looking for. And when you're reading, one of the things to look out for when you're looking for opinion is adverbs, adjectives. When the author seems to give subjective judgment, that's often their way of objecting, subtly or not, their own opinions. Saying something is blue, saying something is green, not really an opinion. But if I say something is great, something seems so simple, or something seems so pure and fantastic, that's an idea of opinion. All right, so take a moment, 1 minute, and we'll take a look at the third paragraph. All right, let's go back. Let's jump in and see how well you did. So we open up the third paragraph. One cannot help but wonder then why no artist in the millennia before Rothko sought to pursue color itself. So according to this artist, no artist before Rothko pursued color itself as a subject. And whenever somebody uses the phrase one, you may often deal with these people in real life, what they really mean to say is, I. Like, one can't help but wonder why you did this. What they really mean to say is, I don't know why you did this. They just, they don't want to admit it's their own personal opinion. So when you see phrases like this, or adjectives or adverbs, it's often a clue the author's, allowing you into their mindset, their thinking, their subjective opinions. And let's continue. They talk about certainly artists all over the world that experimented with how color was represented. And they keep going on. They mention these other works. So the artist mentions calligraphy, had limited color to very little. Then they had Buddhists, had eschewed color altogether. They didn't use it at all. So we have this Enso style, Japanese calligraphy, right? And then we have the Fauvists on the other hand, so this nice phrase, contrast. So these Fauvists, whoever they were using a riot of colors in their styles. Okay? And they even reiterate their contrast with the phrase juxtaposition. So we have this riot of colors contrasted with this Japanese calligraphy, which was very reserved in its color, this Buddhist painting that was completely absent of color, according to this author. Lots of different comparisons. Now, let's take a look at the next paragraph. It's a short one, so we'll go through it together. In each case, the color or lack thereof merely enhanced or commented on the representational efforts of the rest of the composition. Flowery language, okay? But let's see what it means. How can we simplify this? Well, the color, the author's telling us, here's our cause and effect. The color enhanced or just commented on representational effects of the rest of the composition. So it's just a part of the painting. Every work we find still relied on line, form, movement, space, perspective, and all the usual tools of a painter to represent a particular thing or idea. So we're still in this old way of thinking. All right? So we had the usual tools before Rothko came along. It was all the usual tools of a painter, and they were still sticking to this representative attitude, this way of, oh, we're just gonna have to represent some specific thing or person or place. Now let's try the next paragraph. Rothko and the rest of the color field artists broke away from every one of these conventions by removing more and more until only color remained. The typical color field composition has few, if any, lines or forms, and what forms there are, the boundaries between the different colors, are typically blurred and incoherent. This total lack of form permits no interpretation by the viewer of the painting as being of something. Well, if we didn't get it before, this passage has certainly repeated itself enough times that coming out and hitting us with it. These artists are breaking away from every previous conception that had been done before. Every convention done before with color was abandoned by them. And they had almost no color here. We had few, if any, lines or forms. So again, reiterating what was important to this work, contrasting it to what had come before. And again, as we said, the AMC loves to repeat themselves throughout passages, and they will repeat their ideas, which informs us as to what the central themes are, what the main ideas might be. And this lack of form permits no interpretation. There's no way the viewer can think this is of something. So there's no way, according to this author, you should be able to look at these color field paintings and think that's supposed to be something. So they stripped away everything to make sure that whatever they're painting couldn't be about something. It was just there. Their representation. The color was their subject. Right. Now, in the last two paragraphs, I'm going to give you again about a minute to try the second to last paragraph, and again look for any clues as to where do we see any, cause and effect, any relationships, any opinions, any contrast. Okay. All right. So take a moment, and we'll come right back. All right. So let's take a look at this next to last paragraph. It was the biggest one. Opening sentence, and yet when the literature around color field art was being written, so we have again this concept, and we're talking about this literature around color field art, and the author begins to talk about the study of this color field art. After it had been established, people were writing about it, they can see that critics were speaking about this. So we had both critics, these fancy erudite critics, and even casual observers were apparently misinterpreting the work. They were speaking of the work in terms of representations beyond color. And then they give us an example, painting number 61. So whenever the AMC tries to throw out an example of an idea, focus on the idea. we can always come back to the example. We know apparently this is supposed to represent an example of people seeing representations beyond color in Rothko's work. Right? Then they go to the no painting could more clearly be about colors themselves. So according to this author, it should have been obvious to everybody that this painting was just about the color. But everybody seemed to write about, they're just, these people are just not getting it. This couldn't be more clear in the opinion of the author. But everybody, instance after instance, they're talking about whether they see a sunset. Some of these people saw a lake. Some of these people see pre-dawn light. Some people thought they were looking through some subject's eyelids. Right? So these people are just not getting it, according to the author. Whatever they think they're doing, they're just wrong in the author's eyes. They don't get that how far off the mark they were. Okay. So we have, again, this contrast. The author's all about color field art being the color, purely about color. And other people, whether they're learned scholars or just random people, just not getting it. Okay. Okay. Final paragraph. Perhaps pure color is an ungraspable phantom. Even when presented in its purest form, it seems that most observers are unable to accept the work as it is and ever seek for representation. So here's where the author, gives their final, again, they use that pure color term again, pure color ungraspable. Apparently to the author, maybe people just don't get it. It seems that no matter what you do, people need to see representation in their art, and they just don't seem to be willing or able to accept that some things aren't about anything. Some paintings aren't about anything. So now that we've finished reading the passage, we've seen our instances of opinions, cause and effect relationships over and over again. They keep saying that cause and effect, this loss of this focus on color should have been obvious to everybody, but clearly it was lost. This move away was lost on people. So this need for people to see representation, even though the work was going away from that, hasn't been recognized. So perhaps the cause is people need to see this. Most observers are unable to accept work as it is and ever seek representation. So there's our author, this sort of summarizes the author's work, what they've been building towards. Most observers are just going to ever seek for representation. And apparently to the author, they're missing the point of this work, these color field artists. So that could be something along the lines of our main idea. And again, you always want to have a good idea of what your main idea is before you go jumping into the questions, because all questions need to be answered from the passage. And all of your correct answers should stick to the passage, meaning they can't veer too far from the main idea. So it's always a good idea to have the main idea in your mind before you go jump into the questions. So these color field painters, especially Rothko, first time people had really tried to make color the subject of paintings, make the paintings about color rather than just using color as this tool, getting down to the pure color, as the author said it. They stripped away everything else, and apparently it was lost on most people. People still see these color field paintings as just representations of something in their own minds. Okay. Let's move into the questions. Now, tonight's session, again, we're not going to go through all of the questions, but your handout does provide full explanations for all of them. But to jump into cars in depth would take a good 3 hours. We just want to give you a taste of the strategies and methods you want to use when attacking cars. So let's start with the first question. The author seems to think that when viewing a painting, seeing the painting as representing something is blank. Now, we may not even need to research the passage in this case or go back to a specific point, because this is something we know the author kept iterating over and over and over again. We know that the author told us many times, especially in the final 2 paragraphs, that people often need to look for representation, and that when they went to do that to the color field paintings, they were missing the point of these paintings at all. They weren't getting it. These paintings are nothing more than color, but people just couldn't seem to get that. People just cannot seem to avoid looking for something. So if we're looking for an answer that fits that, we can do no better than choice B. A nearly inevitable part of interpreting the painting, whether the interpreter is a casual observer or an art scholar. This perfectly fits the author's final ideas in the last 2 paragraphs that, look, they stripped away everything. It was purely about color. And in this number 61 painting, it was so obvious, but people just couldn't get it. Now, if we look at the other answers, we can take a look at A. An artifact that most avoid when seeing the painting. Well, we know that's not true. We know that according to the author, their last statement was, it's almost inevitable. People almost always do it. Their last phrase in the final paragraph, most observers are unable to accept that it's nothing more than color. So this is way too in the opposite direction. Most fall prey to this trap, so we can get rid of A. In B, choice C, a result of the kind of painting first popularized by Rothko. Well, if we want to go back to the first couple paragraphs, Rothko was the epitome of this new style of painting, this idea of, no, it's going to be all about, color and nothing else. So we can get rid of A and we can get rid of C. Right? These color field paintings were about color and nothing else. They were the antithesis. They were contrasting to things that are supposed to represent something. And finally, choice D, a fashion that went out of style in art critic circles after the runaway success of color field painters. Well, let's see. Well, we don't know what happened after the color field painters, and this fashion as far as we know, this had always been a part of painting, and the color field artists were the first people to break with that. All right, so we don't say everyone out of style, it's just that these guys started painting it, and even then, these color field painters, they were still being wrongly interpreted. People still saw something in their painting. So it didn't go out of style, just that people were missing the point of these color field paintings. So no matter what, viewers, observers, scholars were still looking at these paintings in this way. Right, let's try to take a look at question number 2. So for reading the question, and again on test day, you will be able to highlight the question. So one of the ways you can, if you're having trouble in cars, one of the ways to make sure that you know exactly what the question is asking is highlight the question itself. You have that option on the new MCAT. So here we're looking for the main point in the passage. And this is something we did out of habit. We're going to reiterate in our minds the main point of the passage because you are guaranteed, to at least get 3 to 4 main idea questions. You may not get one in every passage, but several questions on your car section will directly ask you to find the main idea or summarize the main idea. And every correct answer should somehow tie into the main idea anyway. So I'm going to give you guys 1 minute. Given your reading, given our discussion of this passage, take a moment and see if you can find the answer about, well, what do you think best represents the main idea? So come up with an idea, your framework for what we said the main idea was, and then find the answer that best fits that. Now, when you think you've got an answer, go ahead and poll in. So we put up a poll on screen. Go ahead, let us know what you're thinking. All right, so let's wrap up this question. Go ahead, put your answers in, see, and if you're not sure, hey, that's a choice. You can say, I have no idea. So it looks like about 59% of us are going with choice C. 37% of us, a healthy minority, are tempted by choice B. Only 5% are going with D, and nobody was tempted by A. All right, fantastic. So let's go back to the question. Well, we knew that the author had talked about color field as this fantastic thing that broke tradition, so strongly contrasted with everything else. All right, so we can have it down to B and C were the big 2 choices. So we can see B, it is impossible for any human to view a painting solely as a representation of pure color, but instead we constantly look to interpret paintings as a representation of things. So this has a good idea. The author did say most people end up doing this. However, when you see these kinds of phrases on the MCAT, impossible, always, anyone, these kinds of extreme answers are very rarely the correct answer. I don't want to be extreme and say that they're never the right answer, but the author never seemed to be that extreme in their own idea. It's just that most people just can't get it. The vast majority of viewers will get it wrong and still try to see something in the painting. So we don't know that it's impossible for everybody because apparently the author got it. He or she seemed to know this was supposed to be about art. So choice C, color field artists created a new type of painting was for the first time ever able to wholly leave behind the elements of representation and focus on color itself as a subject of the painting. There we go. That fits our idea. It's a little bit more wordy than we had, but it fits the idea, this contrasting of color field paintings with everybody else and how they were different and how they were new. And they were the first people to do this. Okay? Fantastic work. So we've given you more questions for homework, but hopefully you've got a little bit of a taste of what it takes to read, analyze, and go through questions in the car section. The most important thing you can do, though, is stick to the passage. So just to quickly just take a look at question 3, we're not going to answer it, but whenever you see phrases on the MCAT like indicates or suggests or implies, no matter what, it still must tie into the passage. You still should be able to, and you will be able to go to somewhere in the passage to find evidence to back up your answer. Don't be afraid, or don't think that you have to come up with these amazing, fantastic deductions, sort of like a Sherlock Holmes or anything like that. No, the correct answers will always be based in the passage. Even when it says indicates, suggests, implies, it's in there. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a fair question and they couldn't ask you. So we're going to open up to Q&A. So if you have any questions, shoot them into the chat. And we'll address the questions you guys have tonight. But thank you for listening, and I'm going to turn it over to Christy and Todd.
Very good. Thanks so much. We have a few questions that have come in already. Go ahead if you have other questions, type those in now, and we'll get to as many as we can. Here's one that says, is it possible to master cars within 3 to 4 months of practice if you have no previous experience? How many hours would you suggest us to spend on practice every day, and what are ways to improve text resources to practice with?
All right, great question. So yes, 3 to 4 months is enough time, because typically I tell my students, you know, the new MCAT probably requires about 3 minimum to 4 months of studying on average. So that is certainly enough time to work on your car skills. Because the great thing is, from day one, you can jump right into cars. You're doing it, you're practicing it, you're looking at, you know, how the AMC tests this material, and they're very predictable. It's a standardized test. So I would say there's no magic number that says you must spend this many hours on cars. But if you know cars is your weak point, or cars is the toughest area for you, it's most likely because, like for most of us, we weren't born thinking like the AMC. So the car section is the one area where you are required to think like the test makers, more so than any other section, because the other areas you can rely on science knowledge to get you through. So it's more important that when you're doing cars, you make sure you review and analyze, why did you get a question wrong? What was wrong with your answer? Because while you may never see that answer again, that question again, or even that passage again, the reason your answer was wrong, the reason that question was able to trick you, the subtle ways the passage hid what they wanted, what they needed you to find for that question, will be repeated over and over again. So the best thing you can do is not necessarily do more and more cars, although cars practice is great, is make sure you're taking the time to analyze your car's performance and try to put in your own words, why do you think you missed a question? Where did your thinking go away from the AMC's thinking or the passage thinking? Because that's what causes you to make a mistake on cars. When you deviate from the passage thoughts, you deviate from what the author was trying to say. Great question.
Excellent, thanks. This one's come up a couple of times. In the actual test, when you highlight and then you flip back and forth, will that highlighting remain on the passage?
Yes, on the AMC, so if you go in and get an AMC practice test, you will be able to highlight the passage, and when you go there and come back, you'll be able to retain your highlighting. Now, if you're doing practice exams and you submit, the highlighting, as far as I know, the highlighting isn't retained when you're practicing, but as far as the actual exam, your strikeouts stay, your highlighting of the passage will be retained. So if you're a highlighter, that's fine. If you're a note taker, that's fine.
Okay, excellent, very good. Another one that's come up a couple of times, what are some ways to improve your speed and pacing in the cars section?
Oh, another good question. Again, yep. So we didn't really talk about it too much because, again, this was just to take you through some practice questions. But yeah, you're doing all this on a timer. If you do it evenly and just do the math, you have roughly 10 minutes per passage on average. 9 passages, 90 minutes. But some passages will be tougher than others. One of the ways to stay on pace is to give yourself a goal, like a runner. Like runner wants to run a 5-minute mile or less. You want to try and do a 10-minute passage on average. So one of the best ways to stay on pace is to have a pace set ahead of time. Like let's say you do 2 or 3 passages, then you'll check the clock so that you'll know, are you ahead of time? Are you behind on time? Because if you check the clock too often, you might waste time doing that. As far as how to speed up, Highlighting is generally the fastest way to get through a passage. It's not the only way, but highlighting is generally the fastest way. What you should also do is highlight after you've read a few sentences. If it's a short paragraph, complete the whole paragraph, then highlight what you thought was important, what signified opinion, contrast, cause and effect. If it's a long paragraph, maybe pause halfway through, highlight, complete it. You don't want to try and highlight as you read, because then you're not paying attention to what you're reading. You're too busy paying attention to just trying to highlight. Whereas your highlighting should be a summary of, what did I come away with? What seemed to be important? And then you highlight what allowed you to get that. That should make you faster. Being able to read a few sentences, then highlight afterwards, or read a whole paragraph, then highlight afterwards, instead of trying to highlight as you go. That should make you quicker as well. And practice. Practice will bring speed.
Excellent, great advice. This is going to be our last question for time's sake. This person asks, how different is the cars section in the new exam from the old one?
All right, great question and easily answered. Not at all. The only difference in the new cars passages is there are no more natural science passages. The exact tone of the questions, the style of the questions, they have not changed pretty much at all. The AMC's put new labels on them. Before they didn't call them anything. Now they call them Skill 1, Skill 2, Skill 3, but they have not changed. So if you have some solid cars resources, like the old AMC exams, you can use them. They're still valid. This is the one part of the exam that really hasn't changed much. It's a little bit longer, and you actually have a little bit more time than you used to. Great question.
All right, I think that'll be it for our Q&A section. And then I believe Todd from Nextstep is going to come talk to us for a couple minutes.
Yes, that's right. Thank you so much, Christy and Anthony, Dr. Anthony. Just want to go through a little bit and talk about, what Nextstep has to offer and how, we're experts in the MCAT might be able to help you prepare on your path to med school. So, we go. So how can Nextstep help? So the one thing that we have, and that Anthony and anyone else who knows anything about the MCAT would recommend you take advantage of, is our realistic MCAT testing platform. So these are two screenshots from it. So the great thing is the platform itself is completely realistic in terms of the highlighting, the ability to strike through answers, the format that you only see one question of the exam. Everything, the look and feel and function is exactly the same as what you'll experience on test day. The great thing is that we now give away our free half-length exam as well as our first full-length exam completely free. So that gives you 1.5 exams to practice with as you are working through and preparing for the MCAT. We have 10 full-length exams that we do sell, and again, we do give away that first one absolutely free. The great thing about all of these resources, the ones you pay for and the ones we give away for free, is that they have the full answers and explanations for every single one of the questions, so that when you are reviewing the test, you can go through and see exactly why you got the right answers right, why you got the wrong answers wrong, and really get a lot out of the testing and review process. So highly recommend that if you haven't already taken advantage of that you do. And when we send out the slides of this, and you'll all be getting a link to a blog post that has the video of this presentation embedded in it, as well as links to the handout, the slides, as well as a bunch of other resources, as well as resources from SDN. So in addition to the tests, we also have a series of books that have literally thousands of questions and dozens of full-length practice sections that you can use to drill yourself. It's really more questions and more practice sections than any other set of books out there. So they're a really great resource. I'd highly recommend you take advantage of those if you are looking for some additional books. And then, of course, one-on-one tutoring is really where we got our start. So we offer customized study plans, really superior quality tutors, as we have the highest starting pay rate in the industry. And that has allowed us to offer superior value, unbeatable value from the day that we were founded. And our goal has always been to offer test prep packages that are offered one-on-one tutoring for less than the cost of a group prep course. And as you can see, we're still doing that to this day. When you compare us to the tutoring of other major companies, we're literally about half the price. The awesome thing is that we're able to do this tutoring anywhere you are, anytime you need it, because we do operate pretty much completely online. We do have the ability to do tutoring in person, but we know that the most important part is matching you up with a tutor who's going to be a right fit for you in terms of personality, style, and content. And so we want to make sure that you're linked up with them no matter where they are. So again, if tutoring is right for you, there are a couple things. So one, if you find that you've done a lot of studying or you've already taken the MCAT and you know that you need to really focus in on one specific area, you need to really reset your test prep and start drilling down in a specific area, it can be a great way for you to do that with one of our MCAT experts. If you have a crazy busy schedule, many pre-meds do, it might be difficult for you to either self-direct your prep or to find a class that's going to fit into that schedule. So in that case, a tutoring program might be the best fit for you. And lastly, maybe you're applying to a very sort of elite program, you're applying to a school that has a very specific requirement in terms of you need to get a certain score on a certain section. So if you have these sort of very unique sort of specific goals, working one-on-one with the tutor is probably going to help you get there faster and more efficiently than if you are working in a group prep class that is designed to teach 30 students all at once. So again, when you're leaving this the event, you're going to get a survey that pops up. We'd ask you to fill that out. One of the options, if you'd like us to contact you about our tutoring or anything else, you can let us know, and we'll reach out to you shortly. And again, I just want to thank Christy and the Student Doctor Network for having us here tonight. So Christy, thanks so much for inviting us to join you tonight. We really enjoyed presenting on this topic.
And thanks so much to you guys. This has been great. A lot of great information shared and hopefully beneficial to all of you who took an hour out of your evening. Once again, as Todd said, there will be a survey at the end of the webinar. We ask you to take a couple minutes to fill that out. And I'm just repeating the things that he said, but there will be an email going out that will give you the slides and a link to the recording of this. We'll also have the recording up on the Student Doctor Network YouTube channel, so you can access it there as well. Encourage you to find us on Facebook and on Twitter. Both of our organizations have a lot of great stuff going out on social media. And I think that will bring us to the end of our evening. Thanks again, Dr. Anthony and Todd, for presenting tonight. And thanks to all of you who took an hour out of your evening. We hope it was helpful, and good luck to you all on the MCAT and all of your future studies. Have a great night.
Thanks again, everybody.